Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Recently, you had an incident in Las Vegas where a teenager was involved in a brawl with a bunch of other teens. The young man died as a result of being involved in this melee. Now, the story is that this teen saw some kid being bullied and he tried to intervene, and that was when he became a target. Now, of course, you have the white supremacist and the other usual suspects trying to make something racial out of it. They always do. First of all, these teenagers who have been arrested and accused of killing the young man, they were arrested immediately, and it didn't take public outcry to do it either, and they've been charged as adults. None of them has been released, by the way. That's important because I did a video a while back about Caden Smith. He was a 16-year-old who murdered 3 black men in Indiana, and he was released. Not just released pending trial, but released because a crooked judge claimed the search warrant used to access his home violated his Fourth Amendment rights. She threw out all the evidence that was found at Caden's home, including what the police say was the weapon that he used. Now, we can all guess that there was nothing actually wrong with the search warrant or the police's search of his home, but we had a judge who apparently was deciding she wanted to be on the side of the bad guys. The state appealed the judge's ruling, and predictably they won because the warrant was proper. Even the appeals court seemed annoyed that this trial judge tried to suppress the evidence when everything had been properly done. Caden had been at home free for 6 weeks by this time, and it was public outcry that led to new charges finally being brought. See, with those black teens in Vegas, no judge is suppressing anything, and there's no doubt that they're going to go to prison. And no one in the white media is going to say that they're being overcharged or any of the usual excuses they use when the victim is black. This is the sad and predictable result of what happens when the recipients of racial privilege decide that they're going to try to cover up their societal advantage by claiming some sort of racial disadvantage. It just doesn't work. Now, this incident out of Vegas was not exactly the reason for this morning's briefing. Because while there was nothing racial about what happened in Vegas, there was plenty racial about the Riverside race attack in Alabama back in August. But did you know that the black man, the dock worker who those racist punks attacked, he's been charged with third-degree assault? Yeah, the victim of the attack, who was jumped by a mob of racists, he has now been charged with assaulting them. I'm not kidding. Now, did anyone do that with the case out in Vegas? This is important because you've got 2 incidents that are exactly the same, except for the race of the victims and the assailants. That's the only thing that's different in both of these cases, and we see completely disparate outcomes. What happened in Vegas was tragic, but what keeps happening when the victims are black is injustice. Now, how is it that the victim of this race attack, this mob beating in Alabama, being charged with attacking his attackers? How did that happen? Well, I told you about the judge in this case, this Dunson woman. She got called out for the ridiculously light sentences that she gave to the attackers. So she's been trying to pretend like she suddenly remembers the law, and she rejected a plea deal for one of the attackers that had been offered. I guess she's trying to patch up her damaged reputation, or what's left of it. I guess she didn't realize these white supremacists aren't big on gratitude. Despite the practically non-existent punishments that she gave the attackers who have actually been brought to trial or made to have a hearing thus far, that's not enough for them. The lawyer for these racist reprobates is attacking the judge, telling her that she needs to be recused from the case for the remaining few defendants. The city and the police department released a statement saying that neither the city nor the police department were behind the filing of charges against the black dock worker. But they refused to say who was, and the white media was trying to bury it too. I at first thought that it was the racist DA who filed the charges, but in this case, it turns out that a municipal judge did it in response to a petition put forward by one of the attackers. See, one of the racist thugs who attacked Mr. Pickett is trying to weasel his way out of the admittedly light punishment that he's set to get, so he petitioned the court to bring charges against his victim, and it tells you everything you need to know about how deeply entrenched white supremacy is down there. These white supremacists took a huge L in front of the world. So now every rotten good old boy is trying to prove to themselves that they're still in charge. They couldn't win the fight, so now they're trying to whip the black residents with a pen. That's what this is. You know, I'd like to know where all the usual Republican conservatives are at now. You know, the ones who constantly talk about soft on crime, constantly talking about judges giving lenient sentences. They ought to be talking about this one 24/7. After all, they're constantly talking about crime being out of control. America's in the middle of a crime wave. There's criminality everywhere, roving gangs. Yeah, here was one who ganged up on a black man and beat him half to death. But they don't talk about this. They're not talking about this at all, not mentioning it. Yeah, because the victim's the wrong color. You see, when these right-wing conservatives say crime, that's just another way of saying black, because they never bring it up in any other time. See, the judge down there in Alabama, he's not just soft on crime, he's pro-crime. But for the putrid denizens of Fox News and the rest of the right-wing hate sphere, that only matters depending on the color of the person they're talking about. The KKK connection is still in effect, but if you think this kind of courtroom maneuver is some sort of anomaly, it's actually not. See, this is exactly what happened in the case of Jussie Smollett, too. Remember, initially the police didn't bring charges and the DA didn't either. Kim Foxx didn't bring charges against Jussie Smollett. What happened was there was a white woman who went to the Cook County courts and she petitioned a judge to bring charges against Mr. Smollett. What the judge did was he appointed a so-called special prosecutor to investigate. And what followed was the biggest waste of taxpayer dollars in the history of Chicago, as the white racist powers that be tried to make up for the huge L they took when Jason Van Dyke was convicted of murdering Laquan McDonald. It wasn't the DA who kicked off that kangaroo circus. It was a judge who did so. And before anyone asks, I think this is basically something that has to do with low-level municipal court. It's not exactly something that goes through state law per se. Now, at worst, what happened with Jussie Smollett was a misdemeanor. And filing false police reports isn't severe enough to warrant a prosecutor's time. Just ask Amy Cooper and Cy Vance up in Manhattan. Amy Cooper was the woman who called the police about a black man who told her to put her dog on a leash. But you know that heifer who went to court against Jussie Smollett? She didn't show up on her own. She was obviously a plant by the enemy in that town. Now, as I've said for several years now, at least since 2014, a crucial part of bringing justice to this injustice system, a key part of bringing these white supremacists to heel, is going to be holding these crooked judges to account. They're the ones who keep obstructing justice, like with the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, or giving slaps on the wrists with sentences like Jason Van Dyke's, Amber Geiger's, and these Riverboat river rats. These judges have been rubber stamping any measure meant to harm black people, like the judge in Louisville who signed off on what was a blatantly illegal no-knock warrant that led directly to Breonna Taylor's murder. A warrant that was obtained through a fraudulent affidavit. The police lied about drugs being sent to Breonna Taylor's apartment when they knew that there hadn't been any. And the judge didn't seem bothered by it. She didn't bring any of those cops up on charges of perjury. And she hasn't been removed from the bench or sanctioned in any way for her misconduct either. And these judges also signed off on whenever some white citizen comes to the courts and says to bring phony charges against a black person. Whomever the judge is in this case in Alabama, they need to be removed from the bench and stripped of their law license. They also need to be secured prison time. It does go to show one thing, though. While there's little value in getting into a tug-of-war about federal offices per se, there's still a lot of value in participating in local races regardless. The reason the racists in Louisville weren't able to railroad Kenneth Walker was because there was an honest judge on the bench, Olu Stevens. The solution to crooked judges are to install honorable ones. 100 years ago, white supremacist mobs were allowed to run amok, and they destroyed entire black townships with the government's sanction and support. But today is a new day. White supremacists who try to raise up will get stomped out. So they rely on their fellow racists and the government to save them. Make no mistake, if you want to destroy the safe havens these white supremacists have created for themselves within the governmental bureaucracy, that will require us to remove these corrupt officials who have been protecting them and to make sure that they are punished. And we won't waste time trying to put a spine into a cowardly jellyfish like that Dunson character. We've had enough of these self-interested opportunists who only do what's right when they feel they've got no other choice. We need people who get it right the first time. Anyone who attacks our right to self-defense, who ignores the law and even breaks it to protect violent racist thugs, that's somebody who belongs in a cage, not on the bench. And as for anyone who's curious about who gets to make that determination, we've earned the right to be the judge of that. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. TJ Mobb, Brenda McPherson, Michael Rubin, Turk McKenzie, and Terrence Gaines. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.